All right, hello everyone. This is David Wilsey. I'm the Chief Operating Officer with the Balanced Scorecard Institute. It is my pleasure to introduce our special guest today, SchellingPoint owner and alignment optimization expert, Michael Taylor. The Balanced Scorecard Institute entered into a new partnership with SchellingPoint recently after we were introduced to the concepts and found that they complemented our methodology very well. We're now incorporating alignment optimization into our consulting work and are adding a new alignment optimization training course that we will offer for the first time in September. Our clients are already starting to see some of the benefits of optimizing alignment. Not only does it naturally fit in the alignment step in our methodology, we're finding that clients are benefiting from incorporating the techniques right from the start during the assessment step. In this webinar, we've invited Michael to introduce the alignment optimization concepts and discuss how to use them to benefit your organization, as well as how to integrate them with the strategic planning process and the Balanced Scorecard methodology. Well, Michael?
Thank you very much, David, and welcome to everybody that's joined this webinar today. As David pointed out, I'm one of the co-founders of SchellingPoint, and this is an activity that was started as a research project back in 2005, and I'll explain shortly how that research project has led to this new management science of alignment optimization that's now been taught at business schools here in the US and abroad, and has now become available as a set of capabilities that individuals can now actually get trained about alignment rather than just sort of doing it themselves. So what I was going to do here was to really sort of cover two areas. One was to, I'm just trying to move the slides on here, excuse me one moment. One is to really explain some of the core concepts of alignment optimization so that you understand what this is all about, how it's being used, where it's being used, what it's doing for groups that are using it, and then we can explain the actual education and training format. So I think the first point I want to make is that one of the things that we did when we looked at an organization was come upon this view that if you stand back and look at your organization, whether you're a commercial enterprise, a small venture, a government organization, a coalition, it doesn't matter what type of organization it is, there's really two things that are going on that people get involved in. On the left-hand side here, you see there are business processes, and essentially the business processes, those things that are happening all the time that are repeatable, they are what make an organization what it is today. We can talk about hire to retire, order to cash, plan to produce, procure to pay. These are what I mean by business processes. And in this day and age, if we on the phone here wanted to set up a new process, there's been 20 to 30 years of process improvement expertise developed. There's process models, and we could take techniques such as Lean and Six Sigma, and if we set up a new process, we'd expect it to be operating in a high performance rate in its steady state very quickly. At the same time, everything else that people get involved in is some form of collaboration. So if an organization is at this point in time the sum of its business processes, where it will be tomorrow is based upon its collaborations. Collaborations are the term that we use for a group of people that are coming together around a common subject, and they're saying, where are we going to take this subject? And that discussion, its trajectory, its pace, how far it heads, that will determine how an organization will progress over the course of 12 months, 24 months, etc. And so what we found is that if we look at a collaboration as being any group of people with a common subject, whether that is a department, a manager and his or her leadership team, whether it's two groups in an alliance or a coalition or a merger, whether it's a large industry consortia, all of these, what's common is that it's a group of individuals that are saying, well, where are we today on this subject, and where do we want it to be tomorrow, and what are the plans we're going to put together to make sure we get there? Now what's interesting is this picture shows you just some of the examples of collaborations that are going on in organizations today. These are probably going on throughout your organization as we speak, or certainly over the course of the 12 months. We've actually mapped over 90 different types of collaboration that are occurring in organizations today. What's interesting about them is that whereas with processes we could walk up to any process and very quickly start to draw process diagrams, and we see the commonalities in them with tasks and start times and end times and tools. What's interesting about collaborations is that most people don't see any connection between them whatsoever. The leadership team that's working on the business strategy, that's saying where is this organization going to be in the next 3 to 5 years, see very little connection with the group that's working on an alliance. It's probably just an implementation of that strategy or an outsourcing contract. And so of course you're very familiar with the Balanced Scorecard and the notion of one of the things that the Balanced Scorecard does. It ensures that all these activities that are going on throughout an organization do actually align up ultimately to and implement the strategy. But another way of looking at all these collaborations is they're all actually doing the same thing. It's a group of people that come together as saying, what are we going to do with this subject? How are we going to advance it? If you then look at it from that perspective, what you realize is that any group of people, again, whether it's the corporate group, it's an IT outsourcing group, it's a merger, a strategic alliance, working on your diversity strategy, what you notice is that they all follow the same path where they come together and they want to say, right, what do we all think about this subject? Where should we take it? How should it be better in the future? What are the plans we're going to put behind that to make that work? And then during the implementation of those plans, how do we actually ensure a high degree of alignment? Because all the area under the green line is the value that's realized. If you judge a collaboration based upon 3 metrics. So whereas with the process side of your house, I imagine your organizations, you have possibly hundreds of KPIs and metrics for judging processes. On collaborations, there's really only 3 that count. At the end of the day with a collaboration, it's did we achieve the benefits in the time frame we expected at the level of investment that we expected. Based upon pulling together Wharton Business School, Wall Street Journal, Butler Group and various other sources, less than 1 in 10 collaborations attain all 3. Instead, what we tend to find with collaborative activities is that we have high hopes for them, but we're not really disappointed when we find we get one of these red curves where the conversation starts well, but then implementation struggles over time, or it starts as a grind and we finally get there. So alignment optimization is all about how do we enjoy the green line on the subject, whatever that subject is, or we need to produce shared results. What we tend to experience, again, is more of the, how's it going? You know, we're very good at tracking lack of performance on these things. We suffer, one of the issues is when we're not well aligned, we're not executing well. There's the productivity loss. It's a personal drain on people. You don't enjoy work as much. These are some of the things that you experience, and then ultimately someone says, "Okay, let's get some plan together. How we're going to sort this out." And these multi-party activities, whether it's 4 or 14 or 124, they are complex. They're not straightforward. We all individually have our own views about a subject. But as soon as we bring two or more people into the conversation, we have different views, and we have a journey to create in terms of where do we get to, in terms of how do we get there. Ultimately, this leads to, we need to talk about things. We need to get on the plane, and we need to go see each other and arrange these dialogues. We have to take the naysayers and we have to take the lack of commitment and bring it into the conversation and understand what's holding people back and why they're not committing, and judgments of sort of passive resistance. Ultimately, the issue with this is that it's all a lot of talking. So whether you are I'll say, creating and sustaining alignment yourselves through meetings and workshops and retreats and conversations, whether they're in person, offices, or over the phone, whether you're hiring facilitators and management consultants, is a lot of talk. So what we've done is we've basically stood back and said, all these conversations that are going on, how do we make them more efficient, and how do we actually produce endorsed alignment at the end of the day? Because one of the things that we noticed was that the conversation very quickly focuses on quality and accuracy. In other words, we all know, and we take it for granted, that this conversation that we're having has to produce, I'll say, a high quality set of objectives and plans that are accurate. They're an accurate prescription for our situation and where we want to go. And these are front and center in the way we have our dialogues. At the same time, though, what we need to do is we need to generate engagement and ownership, because as we know, if we don't, we'll have all these great plans, but they'll be shelfware. We won't get the execution. But the constraint with this is that the more we talk and the more we dialogue to create that engagement and quality, it hurts our speed and efficiency. So this is why as managers and as leaders, we can often get caught up with this dilemma of, I have the answer, why don't I just tell them, and require commitment and compliance, versus if we have a fully democratic process where everybody gets a voice to build the ownership, we'll still be talking about this 5 months from now and we won't have done anything. So these are the tensions that people are in. So what we did was, if you stand back and look at what goes on in a group of people coming together around a subject, there's actually a natural process that we as people take. The first thing we all do is we instinctively measure alignment between ourselves and others in terms of the views and attitudes and the things that are being said. And then based upon that, we instinctively kick into maximizing alignment. For some people, it's getting everybody else to agree with what they think is right, all the way to others who don't really care about their own opinions. They're more bothered the group comes to some consensus. So we go from measuring, and based upon our assessments, we then try to maximize, and then hopefully we go and act, and as we see things going according to plan or not, we look to maintain the alignment of the group. So alignment optimization is all about enabling this process. Part of where this came from is that we asked leaders and managers, where does this notion of the ability to create and sustain a high degree of alignment fit into your job description? And quite frankly, a lot of people almost laughed at us. It was sort of, well, that's a silly question. You know, it's I'm a CEO, I'm a CXO, I'm an SVP, I'm a director, I'm a program manager. It's 50 to 90% of what I do every day. So we then asked them, okay, so where were you taught? And that's when we found things went silent, because the people that we were using asking this question of were usually at least undergraduates, if they didn't have advanced degrees or MBAs or various other credentials, and they'd explain maybe they've been to Balanced Scorecard training as one of the tools in terms of organizationally how to create alignment, or they've been to team building sessions, but specifically in terms of alignment, you know, where were you taught? And this is the answer that we received. People basically said, well, we haven't. What we have is we have today the situation where all of us have our own private, proprietary, undocumented, unvalidated methodology for maximizing alignment in groups. The consequence of that is that when 8 people come together to discuss a subject, there's 8 private proprietary alignment methods all working on each other. So that seemed to be an issue and an opportunity for improvement, particularly given how people talk about these collaborations, how, again, we have high hopes, but we're not surprised when they struggle, when they don't realize all the potential, when things veer off into tangents, when we come out of meetings and we say after 4 hours, what did we actually achieve there? So I won't spend too much time on this. I'm happy to cover this in more detail another time, but essentially what we did is we took the notion of relational networks which is based upon social exchange theory. We took the work of a professor at Harvard by the name of Chris Argyris and his work in what causes people to act and not act. And then you might notice our name is SchellingPoint, is that named after Professor Thomas Schelling. A Schelling point is that focal point that gives a group of like-minded individuals their common purpose. And groups that have strong Schelling points have the ability to coordinate their actions with minimal communication. So when we are of like mind about why, what, where, when, and how, we can get on and do it. We don't need to be talking all the time. We don't need to be governing and realigning. So we saw an opportunity with these three, and over the course of a couple of years of research, that led now to alignment optimization, which, as I mentioned, we now teach at a growing number of leading business schools, typically to MBAs and second-year MBAs, and this session here is to explain how that material is now delivered in a 2-day executive education program. So what that led to was a set of concepts. This notion of alignment, we use the word all the time. It is something that people instinctively understand, the notion of when a group of people come together that a high degree of alignment is essential to success together. But what is it? It's essentially a soft topic. And if you ask somebody, well, what does alignment really mean? People really cannot describe that. It's more of a sensation, and quite often it's a negative in terms of a sense of misalignment that people experience. So we can now take this notion of alignment and we can now put hard concepts behind it. We can now describe a group state in terms of their degree of alignment, the 4 types of alignment, the states of alignment. We understand the reasons for misalignment. So these are some of the concepts that we now train managers and leaders to be able to understand them and identify them and then work with them. At the same time, what we found was that once you have these concepts, what they revealed was, in terms of how do we take the shortest path from we each think about this subject to we all agree what should be done, if you want to take the straight line through that with the least amount of dialogue, coming out with the most valuable, viable, and endorsed agreements, then there are some things that need to be done that aren't occurring in today's meetings and conversations and interactions. And on a side note, we also identified that there's a place for technology that technology can bring to the table. But what the alignment optimization executive education is about is essentially training managers and leaders, those who are running or participating in collaborative activities, these concepts and methodologies, so they can enable a group to take a short path to, yes, we agree that is what should be done and it's viable, and then follow it through. One of the things that came out of this work was the fact that, from a dictionary perspective, if you look around you, just in the same way that Balanced Scorecard has a dictionary, it means that all of us on the phone here, when we're talking about balanced scorecards, there's dictionary, there's terms, there's language that we can use that means we can all be, I'll say, like-minded on the same page. And if you go into other professions, those dictionaries exist. What we found around the world of alignment is that this is one of the areas where actually the terms that people are using actually produces misalignment and actually hurts the lack of dictionary. One of the core concepts is this notion of like-mindedness as opposed to alignment. So like-mindedness is to thought as alignment is to action. In other words, if somebody asked us all on the phone here, should we go right or left? And if half of you said we should go right and half of you said we should go left, you are displaying non-like-mindedness. And that is absolutely your right. There is no reason for not having those differing opinions. In fact, for those of you that have been to business schools and have been to leadership training or have mentors that have told you this, we actually design non-like-minded groups. You're told to bring together a group of people that have a rich melting pot of backgrounds and experiences. So we actually design non-like-mindedness. The little arrow here, though, is what's critical, which is how do you turn non-like-mindedness And by the way, not judge it negatively, but just respect that it exists. And in fact, one of the tips we teach people is, to actually, I'll say, acknowledge like-mindedness, because it takes a lot of tension out of the air. People don't like to talk about disagreement. It's uncomfortable for most people to disagree with other people. And if you conclude a conversation with, well, clearly we're not aligned, there's nothing better to actually stop a conversation and to shut down the dialogue and put a barrier in the path to getting aligned over the action we're going to take. So one of the first framings that you'll find useful with groups is to use the words more appropriately and understand that understanding where we're like-minded or not is the first step to actually coming into alignment around the action we're going to take. So some of these concepts is that when you start to apply them, what we have found is that when we actually measure the like-mindedness of a group, if 0 is every person disagrees about why we're doing this, what does success look like, what could be some of the side effects that could be triggered, the bad things that could happen by trying to take this path forward, what are the barriers that will stop us being successful. If 0 is complete non-like-mindedness amongst everybody in the group, and if 100 is that sort of that come-by-our state where everyone is, we all think the same, which, by the way, when you initially pull a group together is not a good state to have. Just note that every group where we've measured their degree of alignment has been between 44 and 83. So we've never yet seen a like-minded group. The issue is, how do you turn that into alignment over the action they're going to take? And again, this metric's interesting in terms of, if you're seeing a degree of alignment of 44 at the outset of a strategy conversation, or at the outset of a contract design, or at the outset of a merger plan, well, that's okay, because that's where we are. What are we going to do to get there? Obviously, what's an issue is when you see an alignment index of 44 when they are 4 months into implementing the plan. That's clearly where the plans weren't specific enough and didn't produce significant alignment in the planning process. We can talk more about this later in terms of how do you understand, how do you create alignment, and also how do you understand non-like-mindedness and recover it. But the point is that this is the reality of what's going on with groups, whether these are Fortune 10, Fortune 50 leadership teams, government groups, non-profits, alliances, small enterprises. The other thing to point out is that we tend to think of alignment as a binary. If you listen to the way your colleagues talk about alignment, and possibly even yourselves, you'll hear it talked about as either we are aligned or we're not aligned. It's either 0 or 1. And so rather than understanding that we have a degree of alignment, we have a degree of like-mindedness around this subject, which is going to drive our alignment around our actions, in actual fact it's not binary, it's on a scale, and actually there are 4 types of alignment in terms of how we're going about doing things. The green is where, yes, we all agree that's what should be going on. We knew that already. The yellow is, yes, we didn't think we were aligned around the actions we're taking there. The interesting thing about the yellow is that while people can experience them and sense them, if you're not trained in the right techniques, what they normally lead to is inaction. In other words, I'm sensing non-like-mindedness. I think the actions that me and others are taking aren't aligned, but unless I'm in a power position where I feel I can tell the other person you're doing it wrong, what this often leads to is inaction or unilateral action where, well, you know what, I'm going to go right while they go left. What's interesting is when you have, I'll say, a more appropriate, complete conversation, which is what alignment optimization is about doing, is actually having more conversation but doing it more efficiently, so the net result is about a quarter of the effort, is that the blue appears where you find out areas that you didn't realize you were like-minded, and you now have the basis for leveraging that into new actions that provide more value. And the red, of course, is those areas where you find out that your sensing mechanism couldn't see over the horizon. In other words, the signals that you were getting from your colleagues and your customers and your business partners that were telling you, yes, we seem to be aligned around our actions here and not here, the red is where you find out through some simple questioning there's actually some fundamental misalignment that needs to be dealt with. So at any point in time around different opinions, these states are going to exist. And then the other side of it is that part of the dictionary is understanding what are we dealing with in terms of we as a group. Are we endorsing something? Are we rejecting it? Are we acknowledging there's non-like-mindedness, therefore we would have misaligned action, or is there ambivalence? There's only 4 conditions, and understanding which of the 4 enables you to say, right, this is the conversation or the next step we should take. I can explain more concepts, but essentially what I've tried to explain there is rather than talking about are we aligned or not aligned as a group, now there's better ways to describe this is where we are as a group at this point in time around this subject. One of the things that's come out of this is that when we found non-like-mindedness and misaligned actions, what's been interesting is understanding the reason for that. And not just interesting, but what's been profound in terms of how our opinions of things are causing problems and our inferences are causing problems and are leading to worse situations than they need to be. What we mean by the perceived column here is that when we ask individuals, why do you think the actions and behavior and words of others are misaligned, why do you think they're inappropriate and not what they should be doing, 95% of the time we receive a negative judgment of the other person's intent. Well, the reason why she is doing that is because she's trying to get more of the budget. The reason he's trying to is saying that and doing that is because he doesn't want this project to succeed. And if you listen, when you leave this webinar, if you just go back to meetings, when you listen to your colleagues talk about when they think somebody isn't doing something they should be doing, listen to the reasoning that's given. I believe you'll find that 95% of it is a negative judgment of their intent. She doesn't want to change. He doesn't want to do that. He's setting himself up so he can sell me something later. What that does is that makes that sense of misalignment, it makes it very interpersonal. So why am I going to go over and talk to David about what he's doing wrong that he shouldn't be doing? Because he's only going to deny it and he won't admit it, and I've got to work with him over time, and so I'll just work around him instead. So one of the things that, if you apply these concepts and that we found over the last 7 years, is based upon looking at the reasons for non-like-mindedness and misaligned action, is in actual fact, it's a very vivid situation, but it's actually has a very low occurrence. Is that in actual fact different data which is based upon David has some evidence and experiences and some information that I don't have, so he thinks we're not very good at this. My evidence and reasoning makes me think we are good at it, so when I stop selling David and telling him why he's wrong, we actually find out that, well, I didn't know something and I actually agree with his opinion. But the main culprit in causing misalignment in groups and misaligned action is this one, a different dictionary, which is where we're using terms and phrases in our conversations. We should implement this initiative, we are good at this, we should do this, where we actually have different meaning behind them. Which the beauty of it means that once we can understand, well, David, what do you mean by that versus what do I mean by that, and reconcile those differences, that misalignment, or should I say that aligned action, can occur very quickly. So my main point here is that if you can take the stress out of the notion of misalignment, understand non-like-mindedness, understand these reasons for it, you can have a much more neutral conversation that will yield endorsed actions very quickly. So methodology-wise, I've talked here about basically changing the conversation. The conversations that we're having today are all well-meaning, they're well-intended, everyone's going into it with the right spirit, but there are techniques that are missing and are absent. One of them is that we are having incomplete conversations because there are 4 categories of opinion that drive our action and inaction around a subject. And those four are the assumptions, which are why are we having this conversation in the first place? The goals, what does success look like? So when I get past all the platitudes and the high-level themes and the grand statements that nobody would disagree with, but when I get down to specifically what does that look like 12 months from now, do I agree that that definition of success and that outcome is the same as yours? Then that's another state. And then the U's and the B's are the concerns for unintended consequences. Yes, I think we should be doing something. Yes, I think that's where we should be going. However, I'm concerned that that is going to hurt me or them or affect this other project, and so I'm not sure we should take the journey. Or the B's are the barriers in terms of, yes, I think there's a need to do something. Yes, I think we need to go there, but. So the thing about conversation is that, quite frankly, most of us are having, I'll say, happy conversations rather than realistic conversations, or there's not enough realism in them. Because particularly the U's and the B's, there's only so much of it you can bring up. I'm not going to be the fool that mentions in the meeting that this won't succeed because of that. I've mentioned two reasons why I think this is great, we should do this, but I've got concerns. I'm not going to mention the third, which is I think this is going to disenfranchise that group over there because people will think I'm a naysayer and that I'm not committed to this whole initiative. So there are four categories of opinion that need to be considered. At the same time, and this is one of the exercises that people find the most valuable when we do this at the business schools or in the executive education, is that these subjects we're talking about, whether it's business strategies or outsourcing contracts or alliances or policies, they are complex conversations. And the notion of cause and effect and process language doesn't apply. There is actually behind every one of these topics, strategies and policies and projects and programs and transformations and initiatives and business relationships, they're actually a little mini system model with interdependencies. And understanding what are the components of a topic is vital. And so one of the main exercises is how do we make sure that we understand what are the dimensions of the subject so that we can make sure we're having a necessary and sufficient conversation from the outset, rather than we get in the room, we put an agenda together that's based upon what we think needs talking about, and then we reveal and unravel the rest of the puzzle later on when we get annoyed about it because we've already made some decisions about what we're going to do, and it frustrates us when these other factors come into the conversation. The thing to point out is that overall, what we've found is that when you structure a dialogue around understanding the four categories of opinion around the relevant themes, and you do that in a way that invites non-like-mindedness, you will actually receive many more opinions. Initially that can sound bad because one of the things about this is that we already have too much time in meetings, but actually if you apply the methods later, you'll find that you'll receive a much more rich data set of opinion that's actually going to drive people's behavior later on. And by having that richer data set of opinion and addressing it now and doing so with efficient techniques, you basically say we've worked out about a 4x factor later on. So just notice here that if you ask a group of people what does success look like, while as managers and leaders we'll typically summarize things in 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 summary themes, individuals will see success on average 66 different ways. And on average they'll be aligned and about 15 of them. So we all think we should do those 15 things. But there'll be 37 of them, over half of them, where we don't agree that that's what we should be doing. This is what causes groups to, and the leaders particularly, to claim success, and then others to say, well, how can you say we're successful because we didn't do that? At the same time, notice what I said earlier, which is that most conversation tends to be fairly happy conversation, because we like talking about where we agree. We like talking about actions. What we found, though, is that if you generate a more authentic set of views around barriers and unintendeds and concerns, on average a group will have 61, almost as many reasons for failure as they will what they aspire to. So you can either bring those up at the beginning and accommodate them and use them for innovation, or you can deal with them later on during implementation. So the last piece I want to mention here is that ultimately what we're looking to do is take this, again, this soft notion of alignment, and rather than using the term and asking are we aligned or not aligned, and having the sensory condition where we think we are and we're not, and we take these paths accordingly, is instead we want to produce the accuracy and the quality of the outcome for everybody, do it with ownership, but do it with efficiency. And it's a classical scenario of the best way to do that is to get everything out at the beginning. So in terms of bringing all the themes in, raising people's thoughts about what that's explicitly on their mind, but what are those things that are tacit for them, which they don't realize are going to drive their behavior, but it is something that's there that will drive them. How do we bring out the discussable? Yes, we all agree we should do this, with the indiscussable, which is, that's never going to work, but I'm not going to be the fool that says that. And do it in a way that involves everybody. So ultimately that's what we're looking to do. What that means is that in terms of this notion of like-mindedness and non-like-mindedness, if we use this dictionary, we can start to understand then that we can have opinions, and that R&D and marketing and operations and sales, we are like-minded, that the sales force isn't trained to do that, that we agree that the status on open positions are clear. We are like-minded between R&D and marketing, that we have to succeed here. At the same time, if we can change the conversation not from we disagree, because again people don't like disagreement so much, unless you're a manager and it's a direct report in which I disagree with you because I've got the power to say so. But the notion of non-like-mindedness means that somebody thinks we need to lead in auto-transcribe, but marketing operations, they don't concur with R&D on that. We're not like-minded in that respect. So by being not like-minded, we can ask, why is that the case? And therefore, how do we produce endorsement over what action we're going to take? So ultimately, these concepts which start by saying, how do we generate a complete data set of opinion, so that by having that complete data set of opinion, what we can do is rapidly pinpoint the necessary conversations. So this is what this education and training is about, is how do I generate that data set? Don't be fearful that I'm actually going to spend more time, because again, at the end of the day, you're going to spend about a quarter of time actually having the full amount of, having all the conversation, but generate the data set so we can then pinpoint, here is where we need to talk, so that we can then basically set it up as, here is where we're like-minded, and we can get aligned around the actions we're going to take, and do that efficiently rather than lots of meeting time consumed with the happy, comfortable conversation. So we can then take those non-like-minded areas and reconcile them and say, okay, so what do we agree to, and what are we going to do about that? So ultimately we can put a plan together that where we can say, yes, we all agree that is the most valuable, viable set of actions that we should take. In terms of the application of alignment optimization, I think I've mentioned before that it's not designed for any particular industry, it's not designed for any particular group of people. Again, whether they're in government organizations or high tech or the food industry or associations and alliances. But some of the examples that are just worth explaining are the cosmetics company where there was a CEO and a leadership team of a cosmetics company that was having a conversation about what are we going to do to grow revenues 20% over the next 3 years and do it without mergers and acquisitions. We have to do it organically. And they'd hired a sales and marketing consultant, and they were in the conversation, and they're talking about we should do a voice of the customer, we should train the salespeople in consultative selling, we should reorganize the supply chain, we should do more discounting schemes, all sorts of very good logical ideas, but they were not converging and coming into, I'll say, like-mindedness and alignment about what they were going to do. So when AO was applied to that, what was surfaced was there was a statement that said, we sell commodity cosmetics. Well, it turned out that 60% of the group felt that we sell commodity cosmetics, and the other 40% thought we sell value-added facial solutions. Don't ask me what one of those is. I still haven't figured that out. But that was an opinion, that was a non-like-mindedness about what they were as an organization that had never been expressed, but when it was surfaced and they realized their non-like-mindedness, led to a 3-hour conversation that led to this is who we are, and then all of those views and opinions around should we be a commodity supply business or a value-added solutions business fell into place within the rest of the day. I won't explain all of these, but just others to explain, given the time here, is the sustainability group where they had come together, 43 of them had come together, philanthropists, business executives, government officials, and others, and people, specialists in green and sustainability. They'd come together to invest tens of millions to address the issue of sustainability. And after 18 months, they were frustrated with the progress or the lack of progress that they had made and the dissatisfaction with their investments. Again, a lot of opinion, a lot of discussion, but one of the things that came out after applying AO after 2 hours was that there was basically what we found out was that half the group believed that the Earth is now dead. That was their opinion. The Earth is now dead. And that their responsibility was to decelerate the rate of decline for future generations. The other half felt that the Earth wasn't dead, it was going through its natural climatic life cycle, but the humans were exacerbating it with greenhouse gases and other reckless activities, and therefore their mission was to prevent and reduce that. So this group are all gathered around the notion of sustainability. They talked about actions and things that should be done. They'd made investments, but fundamentally that non-like-mindedness around that core fundamental view of what was going on caused them ultimately to break into 2 separate groups. They could not reconcile the non-like-mindedness. They said we have 2 worldviews, and they actually broke up into 2 investment groups with 2 sets of opinions on how to go forward. So I can explain case after case, but what I want to do here is just allow some time for Q&A to say that hopefully what I've explained here is that if you're in your organization and you have your balanced scorecard, either you're assembling it or you have it in place or you're implementing it, and what it's doing for you is from an organizational perspective, and I, by the way, myself have run 2 businesses, built a business and run a business with Balanced Scorecard, and I've had people trained to go and build the scorecards and manage them for us. So as a practitioner, I understand how the Balanced Scorecard can set you up for organizational integrity in terms of that there should be alignment around everything that we're doing. In practice, then, when you get into the day-to-day implementation of activities and strategies and plans and the things that will implement the Balanced Scorecard, then you have groups who are collaborating. And this is where the factors that we've explained here arise, which is as soon as you have a group of people that are working on something to implement one of those activities or objectives on the Balanced Scorecard, you now have an alignment condition, and you have the concepts we've described here. So Initially, again, this was a 3-hour business school lecture where it would be an hour and a half of lecture, then an hour of exercises. And what we've been doing now with this material that we've introduced here is that this is now conducted as a 2-day workshop. The next workshop, and I believe this is on the Balanced Scorecard website, is on September the 15th and 16th. And it is for, again, we use the term managers and leaders. It's for individuals who are leading or responsible for or actively participating in collaborative activities where a group of people need to come together on, we each think this, but we all agree we're going to do that. And the 2-day workshop goes into detail on what exactly are these concepts, what do they mean, and then how do you identify them, and then what do you do about them. And associated with that, of course, is a more complete dictionary, so that when you are dealing with others who understand alignment, you can be using a common dictionary, and you can also train people in collaborations to use the dictionary to take advantage of it. At the same time, over the course of that 2 days, you are learning the skills and the methods, and the actual workshop is set up as the journey from we each think to we all agree to do. So through the course of exercises and basically practice, you leave at the end of those 2 days knowing the concepts in the dictionary and having applied them with the cohort in actually working on particular subjects, so you can arrive at an end result and endorsed action. So that's where I'll stop here, David. And for those that are on the phone here, I hope this has been useful. This has been an introduction to the management science of alignment optimization, and would be very happy to take any questions about any of the concepts or the methods or the training.
All right, very good. So if you have any questions, there's a on the GoToWebinar interface, there is a question panel. Just enter your questions on there, and I'll let Michael review those and answer those questions. I would like to add one thing. This is brand new for us, but we've already started to get some positive feedback, from the clients that we're working with. What we're hearing is we're not just listing the SWOT items on a flip chart anymore. Now we're really understand how aligned we are around particular issues. Are we really aligned around the high-level goals or the vision that we're crafting in our planning sessions? Are we really aligned around the unintended consequences that we're talking through? Do we understand the barriers for success? Our weaknesses and things like that, and are we in agreement as to what those things are? And are we in agreement around the assumptions around what we're our current strategic environment? All right, let's see. Are there any online courses, or is it difficult? Oh, okay. Do you ever teach this as an online course?
Great question. No, not yet. There is an intention to do so, but right now it's an experiential, because it is designed for collaboration, because it's designed, while it's meant to be a skill that you as an individual come away, you come a new competence now, which is the competence of alignment optimization, and while you possess that skill, it's a skill that it doesn't do much when you're on your own. So it's obviously applicable when you are with others, and so at the moment it's an experiential activity in terms of applying it around particular topics. So you can actually not only just learn the concepts, but you can actually develop the skill by the time you come out of the workshop. So at the moment it's not an online. We run them here in the United States once a quarter. If an organization wants a group, we recently had 32 CEO and leadership, 32 member CEO leadership team that wanted the whole group to go through this. They had a common dictionary and skills and tools, and outside the US we'll put this on outside the US as required.
Okay. Noreen asks, do you find that behavioral patterns and personality types play into the alignment or misalignment? Thank you.
Um, what I would say is that if I can try and have you visualize it this way, is that there are individuals. Well, let me back up. First of all, let me answer it straightforward. There are behavioral types that make it easier and more difficult for groups to understand alignment and to understand like-mindedness and to get aligned. If I'm a promoter, for example, if I am someone who wants my way, and it's either my way or the highway, and I have my ideas and I want to promote them and I have others align with me, that is going to make it much more difficult. So the model that we use, if you can try and visualize it, is if you can think of this as there are individuals, and individuals have got their own skills and competencies around the ability to align with others, and we have something actually called SP team, which is a measurement of that. Think of it as Myers-Briggs or DISC for individuals. So what are my tendencies? Individuals make up teams, and for teams you can apply concepts such as DISC and understand that we have the right balance of the team, but then teams have topics. A project team might have one topic, a leadership team might have many topics. So to answer the question, yes, individual styles will have an impact upon a group's ability to appreciate and deal with non-like-mindedness and get aligned. And so at the individual level we have SP team, and then this work it is essentially aimed to deal with things at a topic level. So you always apply this in the concept of a topic in terms of, do I think we should go left or right on this? And that's one way, by working on a topic, you can release some of the issues of personal behavioral issues.
Okay, Michael asks about use in the government. Charles asks about use in the government. Has it been used in the government? Do you have clients in the government? How well has it been received?
Offline, I can give you a reference of somebody at the US White House. All I'll say there, just because of non-disclosure, is that one of my colleagues actually was in Washington, D.C. with a group, and I'll just say that after 18 months of policy discussion, there was insufficient progress being made and a logjam, and that these concepts were applied, and after a couple of hours there were a couple of items that were identified. There were 2 items that were identified that were causing the federal groups to not be able to create like-mindedness and get aligned. So yes, we have examples in, like I say, the U.S. government at the federal level, and also at the state and the local level. We could talk about, yes.
Yeah, very good. How long does the alignment cycle process take?
Well, let me answer it this way. The point, I'm going to go back to one of the slides here. The point about the skills and techniques is you can use them if you want to in a phone conversation. So, and I would hope, actually, I mean, this is one of the things that you'll be told if you go through the training. You'll be told this, but we had a group. We had one company, went to training because the chief operating officer said, I was in a 1-hour meeting with some people from SchellingPoint, and I realized how they'd been using the techniques all the way through the meeting, and it was a very successful meeting. And so it's like anything. If you want to get a group of people and say, what do we all think about a subject, and how do we turn that into, we agree to do the following, you can do that in, I mean, it depends upon the size of the subject. If you're going to be working on a strategy, you're probably going to take, a couple of days on that. But the main point behind this is to apply this in both those, I'll say, main, sort of complex, important subjects, but in those everyday discussions. What I will say to you is that if you look at the total amount of time from let's start the conversation to beneficial action took place, the total amount of effort will be about 1/4. So I'll answer it that way.
Very good. And how time consuming is it for the individuals involved?
Well, again, the alignment optimization executive education is 2 days, and that's where you learn these skills and methods. And then in terms of how much time does it take, if you want to produce a complete opinion data set, from each individual, we find you're going to need 30 to 90 minutes of people's time. So the way we put it is that you can go into a room and start talking and have a 2-hour meeting and think about what you could achieve in a 2-hour meeting, where you would normally say, okay, what are we going to talk about? Let's start some talking. You'll talk for so long, you'll reach a point where you'll say enough conversation, now let's start to converging onto the actions. Instead, we would use, I'll say, or you would use, using your AO techniques, you'd use less than that 2 hours to generate this data set of opinion, and then from that you would pinpoint some very specific conversations where you can say, hey, we're all aligned here, talk's not needed. Or we're all aligned here, let's go straight to what we're going to do about it. Or in these situations, we're not like, we don't have like-mindedness here, we don't have it, and then there's a technique that we teach that within literally minutes you can turn that around into, so we do agree this though.
All right, very good. I think we're just about out of time. We have an awful lot more questions. We will address those questions via email. There's a lot of questions about the product offerings and things like that. Just and sort of a blanket answer. The course is going to be available it's offered in the Philadelphia area. It's in September. You can get more information about that on the Balanced Scorecard website, balancedscorecard.org. A recording of this webinar will be made available as well, and so watch your emails for a reminder about that when that becomes available. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks everybody for spending the day, David, for everybody investing the hour to learn about the subject, and all the best with everything that you're doing. Take care.